morning, everybody. Let's get started. How dare you? Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. This is so excited to see so many like-minded, passionate people here. My name is Ann Bennett. I'm the Executive Director of the Howard County Historical Society. I am really pleased to welcome our partners, the Tassau Heritage Greenway and Preservation Maryland, to our space today, and to welcome all of you. So I hope this is not your first trip to the Museum of Howard County History, but I will not shame you by raising your hand if you have not been here before. But welcome to the space. Thank you for being here today. We hope that you come back. The Howard County Historical Society has this museum where you are at today, and you're welcome to look through our galleries as you leave today. And right next door is the Ellicott Mills Children's Museum as well. So those are our two main museums. In addition, we have an archives over at the Miller Branch Library where you can do your research, and you're welcome there as well. So feel free to get in touch with me. Feel free to ask any questions about the space or the Historical Society and what we do for the county. Just a couple words of housekeeping. The restroom is right over here to my right. That's the only one we have on this floor, so you're welcome to use it at any time we need to. For those of you on the other side of the room, this is just a big U shape in the back gallery. So if you have to go out, you can just go out that door and come out to the other side to the restroom or to the front door. And then finally, we do have a donation box right next to our gift shop. If you're able to throw $1 our way, we would greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, we would also like to mine you for data. So if you look on the literature tables over there and at the welcome table, you will see a little QR code. If you can scan that and take a quick survey and let us know what you want to see in Howard County. And it's open to everyone who wants to take the survey, whether you are residents or whether you are coming to Howard County for the first time. We just want to hear more information about what you need, what you like in the county, and how the Historical Society can help fulfill that. So those papers are on the table on the side and on the table as you leave, and you can scan that QR code if you have any questions about the process or have any trouble. I'm happy to help as well. So I will pass it over now to our presenters for today, and just welcome everyone in the room, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Hello. Not that close. How are you? I am Christiana Limniatis. I am Program and Outreach Manager for Preservation Maryland. We are your statewide historic preservation advocacy organization. We're here to talk about historic paint color. Like I said, we are your statewide historic preservation advocacy organization. We're here to provide advocacy support, technical support, and sometimes financial support for all manner of your preservation adventures that you find yourself into. In addition to providing support here in Maryland, we also power the Campaign for Historic Trades, which is a national workforce development organization. So we're working with here in Maryland, across the country, with partners to create and reinforce the traditional trades. We can be on our soapbox all day long preaching the benefit of reusing our built environment, but if we don't have the tradespeople to do that work, what are we doing? So that's incredibly important today. We're just going to get right into it, right? So first we're going to talk about, is this sound good?
If you put that down.
It'll be better this way?
Yeah, you're just cracking up. We can hear very small space. I can hear you just fine. Everybody else here?
All right, I'm just going to keep it here in case because we're recording, but I'll just project a little bit better this way. All right, so we are just going to go and run through the different eras of paint color, of architecture in America, and kind of go through what are the trends that are happening in that time period. This is incredibly overly simplified timeline, right? There are much more specific ways that we can break this up, but we're not here for hours or a whole entire graduate semester class. So these are just kind of the general things so that all the characteristics are kind of similar in that way. So we'll run through these things, and at the end we're going to talk about some of the lessons we learned through all of these recommendations from the historic time period, and then we'll take a look at a couple of examples and have a lovely discussion of questions and things that you guys have come up with. So first, let's talk about that colonial era. So again, we're focusing on European colonization era, European influenced architecture, about 1500s to 1790s. Obviously here in Maryland, we didn't have Europeans settle in the 1500s, but in other parts of America that did happen. During this time period, I love the turn of phrase colors laid in oil. That's what they would refer to
paint that would be used for your house. It's just a great turn of phrase. I love to include that. It's also important to know that because if you are doing, further research, the way that people describe things change over time, right? So if you go to newspapers.com or some other primary source and search paint color, you're not going to find anything. But if you search colors laid in oil, you're going to find some things during this time period for you. While there's definitely oil paints that are used in architecture, interior and exterior, the vast majority of the paint that we're going to see during this time period is going to be some sort of whitewash, some sort of milk wash or non-oil-based wash on it. The saturation levels will vary. Some of them will be, as the name implies, a whitewash and very thin. Some of them will be a bit thicker and have a bit more of a color saturation to it. But the natural-based materials are really what's going to be the main use during that. When we talk about the examples of historic paint color across the country, the Northeast, we're going to see a lot more vibrant examples survive, mostly because the majority of their buildings are wood frame structures that were either completely unpainted or completely totally painted. And so that helped them survive longer. Once we get south to the mid-Atlantic and certainly into the more traditional southern areas of the country, we're going to see more and more brick, and that's what we have here in Maryland. So here in Maryland, we have a lot of brick washes, colored brick washes. So red wash was a very popular thing that you'd see on colonial era brick buildings. Tinted red whitewashing to hide the imperfections of the brick, to give it that look like it is a nicer quality brick than it actually is. So not totally a full color level of paint, as if you were painting it with a latex paint today, but a nice little wash trimmed around to accent the mortar lines too. You're not going to cover the mortar lines with the red, you're going to keep those white. Just give it that really fancy level brick look that it would maybe not have in real life. When we are painting, whether it is a wood frame structure and we have clapboard on the outside, or we're painting the doors, the wood trims, the cornice lines, all of those elements, we are going to be leaning towards strong hues and contrasting patterns. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. When we talk about colors during this time period, it's also important to keep in mind that white is just another color. It's not the neutral, automatic, base that we think of today. You walk into Home Depot, Lowe's, any of the big box stores, and the ready-made trim is all white already. We all kind of make jokes about landlord specials, everything's just painted white in your apartment. And that's kind of how we function today, but in this time period, yeah, there might be white trim, but it wasn't that, oh, it's the neutral, so I'm going to paint it white. It was just another color option to have very contrasting color combinations. And then also incredibly important to keep in mind is that lots and lots of houses were totally unpainted. It was very, very normal. You'll see that a lot when you look at that first generation of buildings, especially in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. You think of any movie you've seen of the Salem witch trials or anything like that. It's going to be these really dark colored wood buildings. They haven't been painted or whitewashed with a tinted wash. They're just completely a bare wood. I mean, that's what traditional trades gets you. An old growth wood, they could have it unpainted for so many years and it would be perfectly fine. If you have an unpainted wood house today, may God, the gods help you. Here on the images that you see is a drawing from the time period. It was a traveler from Germany showing downtown Boston. Obviously, his business is an engraver. He wants his pictures to be pretty, so there's probably some artistic license in some of those colorings, but he is making a point that every building is painted. Every building has a contrasting color combination on it. So again, how accurate the colors are, who knows? But there is a very elaborate color combination. I am going to note quickly that everyone who signed up for today, whether you signed up online or you put your email on the sign-up sheet, you'll get a follow-up email. You'll get copies of the slides and other resources that I'm going to talk about today. So keep that in mind. Here on the bottom, you'll see it was a newspaper article in quotes for sure. Newspapers have evolved over time, and during this time period, there would be a lot of ambiguity. Is it an ad? Is it an article? Is it whatever? So who knows, this might be an advertisement for this whitewash company and this man who's making this whitewashing, but the benefits are innumerable. It's such a great thing for your house. Not just on the inside, at the outside, but certainly on the inside. That would be very, very common. The whitewash the walls for cleanliness, for painting, for aesthetic purposes. So here are a couple of examples of some brightly colored colonial era buildings. Again, because in Maryland, the majority of our colonial era buildings that survive have either had countless rehabilitations, not so good, maybe some good, where we don't even have evidence or surviving any sort of color on those ones, right? But then we have brick ones that, because it was the whitewashes, those natural made colors have faded and not stand at the test of time. There's not even enough to test that brick building to see what colors and pigments might be lasting. So we don't have a lot of crazy colored exterior buildings here in Maryland. So again, we gotta look to the northeast for some of those. The color's not the best in here, and I think it's raining now, so that's certainly impacting our beautiful sun coming in through the windows. But here at the top corner right here for an interior example, this is an actual room that was removed from an Alexandria hotel, and it's now installed at the Met in New York City. They have an entire wing that's all American period rooms that were salvaged from buildings that were demolished or otherwise going to be lost. And so this entire room is that second-story ballroom that used to exist. It is a vibrant teal color, incredibly bright. All of the furniture is, you know, whether original or not, is intentionally very contrasting colors to that. Up here in the top brown building with the red trim, that is from Connecticut. It was built around 1720. It's the Stanley Whitman House. It's a National Historic Landmark. And this is kind of an example of that, you know, medieval kind of architecture of those first generation of buildings that were built. It is painted. I think the office is better.
Yeah.
It's hard, man. It is a painted brown color. It's not a wash, but it is a brown, dark, deep brown color, and then it's a deep red that is that accent color. That is incredibly common. Again, if you go to like historicnewengland.org, to that organization, so many of the buildings that they researched, that same kind of color combination is common. This one, it was a bad photo to begin with. I actually almost didn't use it, and now I'm really mad that I used it. This is a really bright straw color, yellow straw color, and this is in Rhode Island, a National Historic Landmark District in Providence. And then this one is, again, this bright robin's blue egg, gorgeous blue color. The whole entire building, every piece of wood on the outside. This is currently in Massachusetts at Deerfield. It's a, like historic building Disneyland. Like there's some buildings that are originally were there in that locale, but they save buildings and transport them there. So it's like a whole little garden park of historic buildings. And this is one, I think it was originally in Connecticut, but it was moved to Deerfield, you know, fully intact like that. So again, kind of sad for us here in Maryland. We don't have crazy examples. You know, maybe we did, but they got burned, they got lost over time. But what we do have is science, and science is awesome. And there was some shenanigans in the 1800s into the early 1900s. People, well-intentioned, lovely ladies, especially the Mount Vernon ladies who saved that house, kind of came up with crazy rules of like, these are what colonial colors were. They weren't terribly off, but they weren't good, because they were looking at what was surviving. Right? A color's going to fade. The different chemicals that were included in it are going to make little weird chemical reactions that we can't predict or know why, or we can figure out why. But there's so many factors that can change that color. So a lot of the original colors that they put forth as colonial weren't really that accurate. So then we get to the 70s and we start getting science matching up and meeting our needs, where we have high-level cameras that can zoom in and look at these samples and see the microscopic layers of paint on top of each other. We have the different testings that are available to be able to do the composition of what chemicals went into that. And so we come up with charts like this. I brought a couple of books with me today, too, that you guys can look at. This chart came from this book, Paint in America. It's considered one of the first palettes of colors of colonial era time period that was totally based on solid scientific evidence. Most of these that are included in here are from New England, but there are a couple from down here in Maryland. So this first one right here, and again, just because of the coloring in the room right now, it's coming off a little weird. These two are kind of straw yellow kinds of color, hay kind of colors. The top one is called lightish yellow, light yellowish brown, and it dates from 1750s, and it was used on the exterior clapboard at St. Francis Xavier's Church in St. Mary's. So the entire church would have had that straw color exterior on it. That other kind of brownish color, which was actually called brownish pink, when the studies, that's from 1790 at Hampton Mansion in Towson. And that was interior wood trim, part of a polychromatic scheme in a parlor room. Yeah.
To see these more accurately, are they in that?
Yeah, when the
Okay.
spread, yeah, they're in the book. You can
Okay.
look them up here, and I'm going to give you the slides, so you'll get nice, clean views of the
okay.
pictures and stuff. And they're humongous pictures, so I'm actually going to have to figure out. I'm going to have to split it into two PowerPoint or two PDFs because I was not thinking about picture size at all. So then this kind of other medium pink that's down here, that was found at the Bryce House in Annapolis. It dates from about 1770s. That house was built in 1773, so it's on par to being one of the original colors. It was an interior example from interior wood trim around dark doors and dark baseboards. This blue color down here, again, a nice robin's egg kind of blue, was found on the Charles Carroll House in Annapolis. Again, late 1800s, it was built in 1730s, and that was on interior plaster walls. And again, we saw kind of the example from this house down here at Deerfield Village, and sort of here in the old ballroom, the method was full color saturation. So this house in the Carroll mansion, that, even the ceiling most likely was that blue color. So it would just been like an awesome little, cozy little blue paradise in that room. And then a couple of exterior examples. This dark green is from a house in Pennsylvania, but it's a shutter color. 90% of the shutters in this time period are going to have green colors on it. It comes back from this theorist, this color theorist in France. It was the trend, it got picked up, and it kept going. That was an incredibly popular one. And then over here is a moderate reddish brown, another house from Pennsylvania that was used for an exterior door. So we have bright pops of color, and then oftentimes those trims and those extra little doodads are going to be those dark greens and the dark browns. You know, it's hard, we don't have that many fun super duper colors from this time period surviving, but we do have some evidence of it. First example is going to be the State House itself. It's been painted and remodeled a billion different times, and how we see it now isn't that it's the one and only way that it can be shown, it's that they've decided a particular period of interpretation, and that's what they've restored the building back to. But there was evidence that before that there was some crazy painting happening going on, that there was some boldness and some light blue and then like a polychromatic straw color, where this top dome right here, every other shingle was like it's two different shades of straw color, and they would be this attempt at like a poor man's gold, that by having the two different colors it would give kind of the impression that it might have been a golded dome. So like that's super interesting. But again, there wasn't enough of it surviving to say that, oh, that's what it actually should be. There wasn't enough documentation. It's really just this 1 foot picture that exists of it with this color scheme. And in the rehabilitation project, in the testing phase, the paint was so unstable it was actually damaged. So it was just a blip in its history, having this crazy polychromatic scheme, but it happened. The building at the top here is the old Treasury building. Paint analysis done on this building shows that it originally had red whitewash on it, so that it was, from its construction, had that red whitewash on it to make it look a better quality than it is. It's considered the oldest surviving public building in Annapolis today. And then at the bottom is that James Bryce house that we talked about that had that blue color on before. Paint analysis on the exterior of this shows a yellow wash that was on it. So again, it's not going to be a completely saturated And if you think about from like the 1950s or 60s where you had that kind of like whitewash thing happening on ranch houses and stuff like that, that's not what this would have looked like. That is a different kind of application and a method of doing it. It would be a much more lighter, just trying to make a unified surface without totally covering it. These are going to be softer bricks. If you totally cover that surface, you're going to create water issues and problems. So again, we want the aesthetic changes and benefits, but we don't want whatever that material on it to get that aesthetic change to negatively impact the function of that material, that brick. All right, that is our colonial time period. Then we're going to move into the federal era, so the beginning of the nation, right? So up into the Revolutionary War, and we're doing a very generous timeline into the 1840s. But, so the 1840s is when it starts to get a little more kooky and crazy. Through this first half of the 1800s, we're still doing the same color schemes and same approach as we were doing in the colonial times, but the evidence is suggesting that it was just a little bit more muted, a little bit lighter. So maybe not the big bright straw color, the hay in the middle of autumn kind of color. Maybe we're doing a really light baby yellow instead. We're not doing the big, huge, bright robin's egg blue or that bright, bright teal. We're doing a little bit of a softer, diluted, less saturated color on there. The styles that we're going to see during this time period, Georgian is going to be kind of on the flip-flop. It's more of a colonial, but here in Maryland, we see a lot more Georgian being built into the early federal period just because it was so popular and we were already like so committed to that style of architecture, just kind of kept going for a while. Federal style buildings and then Greek revival style. One of the things that's a fun little connection to world history and our history, we have during this federal era, the Greek revival style is starting. And the whole kind of mentality around that is that we are a brand new democracy, right? We're building this new version of democracy. We are going to look back to where it came from and call back to the architecture of Greece, of ancient times, and have that influence our new building of this new center of democracy, right? And that is happening at the same exact time that Greece is starting their fight for independence against Turkish occupation for like 400 years of slavery the Greeks, the Ottoman Empire had over Greece. So that's literally happening now. All of England is like absolutely obsessed with Greece. Like Shelley's going there, all the romantic dudes who are crying into their poetry books are going to Greece to join the fight and be part of this romantic, restoration of classical, Greece and democracy and all of these things. So we have a lot of materials and materials being written about Greece. So it's just emphasizing this wanting to have this connection to it. It's also at the same exact time that all of the first generation archaeologists are going to Greece and stealing everything. So we're getting these amazing images of what these things look like at that time. And that is what is influencing these types of architecture and the shift to the muted, this classical ideal because we're going to take over and fill that spot that Greece left. 1812, this is the cover, or not the cover, but the title page for directions for house and ship paintings. This was a huge big deal when it was published in 1812. One of the first kind of American published pattern books and building instruction books. And it includes information about colors and choosing what colors should be the best ones to choose. And if you give me a second. He didn't want there to be huge contrast. He wanted to have contrast, but not the big changes there. He recommended colors like white, cream, straw, even an orange, pea green, parrot green. Of course, none of these have images or colors in them. It was before that was a thing, so who knows what parrot green means? I would like a room that's in parrot green, grass green, red, slate, and black. Those were the colors that he was recommending. If we think back, there were a whole bunch of other colors that were used in the colonial period. So we're still having those, but we're just kind of zeroing in on fewer and less variety. Because of that whole thing, connection to Greece and Greek revival architecture, and this idea that white, crisp, ancient artifacts is that's what we're trying to copy, right? The Parthenon, the Acropolis, all of these ancient art places, we want to look like that. So, of course I can do that.
Good, you give it to me. I'll put it back. I'll put it back. Yeah.
Thank you. So we get this idea that this time period we have a lot of buildings that are just going to be all white with green shutters. That's like the Greek revival stereotype of what these buildings are going to look like, right? But joke's on them is that none of these ancient buildings that they're trying to replicate and call to were actually white to begin with. All of those capitals, those huge ancient pieces of architecture had dramatic color schemes on them. If not fully on the whole exterior, but at least the cornice lines and sculptures and things like that. So it's also just kind of ironic that we're calling and creating this ideal that didn't even really exist. We've completely falsified that. But here are some great, totally white, Greek revival era kind of buildings here in Maryland. The bottom one here with the little eagle doodad on it, that one is from Frostburg. Its estimated construction date is 1827, and again, you can see it's kind of on the edge. You can see how it's a federal style building, but we also have some Greek revival. There's a lot of overlap in that. But again, falling back on that white with green shutters. This one at the top here is the old Mondonawin estate in Baltimore. A very high style Greek revival mansion, 7-part mansion probably even. All of the highlights for Greek revival architecture completely white. Sadly, it was torn down and is now the site of a mall. So that's awesome. Down here is a Greek revival building from the Mount Vernon neighborhood in Baltimore, and then this one is from Clear Springs, Maryland. It has some extra later additions and changes to it, but you look at the main block of the building, solid federal Greek revival era building, again completely stark white with green shutters. It doesn't have the same stranglehold that it has on in places like New York and Massachusetts. You drive through any small town in New York and half the town is going to be white Greek revival buildings. The Erie Canal, as they built it, just every town that was built when the canal got to them, they just built 500 Greek revival white buildings and then moved on to the canal stop. So we don't have as much as the Northeast does, but we certainly have a good amount here. During this federal time period is when we see, again, the beginning of pattern books really making their way to America. We're going to have in the 18-teens and onward ones being published here in America, but the vast majority of the ones that are going to be used are going to be coming from London, from England. Again, we're not going to have color pictures in here. They're not going to have color samples in here, so it's all going to be the words that they're explaining to us in their descriptions of how to build the buildings and what doodads need to be stuck on it, but what colors should have. So Robert Luger, he was a very popular architect, landscape architect in England. Here is his very popular pattern book, Architectural Sketches for Cottages, Rural Dwellings, and Villas. We need to be careful about the colors that we want because we don't want to have a bad tone of color. If you pick the bad tone of color, it just got cut off a little bit. We would interfere with the harmony of the building, right? So that's what they're talking. They give a couple examples of colors, really generic, greens and reds, be with nature, but they're just trying to say that color is important. You need to think about what you want your building to say, who you like and whatnot, and choose ones that'll be agreeable with that, right? So there's this one. Here's this next book that's from Bartle. This is from 1804. If you pick a color, it might be disgusting. You might have a picture, a color, this fine red brick, perfect white of white lime wash is equally disgusting. So you might have a disgusting color. I just love that. But he's recommending that you have a sober color, that it's much more adaptable for your houses and easy there. This thing, he's in this little footnote down here, he kind of rants about the overuse of white, and that it's just disgusting everywhere, that's just as bad as having dark everywhere, and having white everywhere is just horrible. Which is hilarious because Charles Dickens, during this time period, famously comes to America. He's traveling through the Northeast, and he writes in his diary how every house is white, stark white. There's a whole line about it. Every little town has all of these little white houses everywhere. So it's happening, and these books are helping make it happen. For an interior example for this time period, this is another one of those rooms that was recreated and installed at the Met. And this is from a Baltimore City house that was torn down in the 60s, I think it was. They're interpreting it and have it set up as a dining room, but it was originally just a normal parlor. But all of this woodwork, all of the color, all of this is original to that 1830s room. And so again, we see it's not wall-to-wall bright teal, but it's still colorful. It's just a little bit more subdued, a little bit more feminine, whatever that means. That's how they would have described it in that time period. But we're just kind of taking the loudness down. We want to be a little quiet. We have a country now. We need to calm down and be a little bit more refined. Okay, so now we took a little break and we got a little calm because we were grown-ups starting a country. But while that is happening, we get the Industrial Revolution. We get the Erie Canal. We get railroads all over this country, thanks to us. And we get the Louisiana Purchase. We have now all of this space to go forth and conquer. And with the advancements of technology, we can do that so much quicker, and we can, the normals, what would become middle class, what we would consider as poor people, whatever words you want to use, they now have access to materials to decorate their homes that previously only very wealthy people had. We have catalogs. You have a Sears catalog. You can go to your general store, point at something in a book, and have that delivered to you on a railroad to your town within a matter of 6 to 9 months. Very, very quickly, like the fastest you've ever received a package. It's mind-blowing, and you have all of this access now where it is this beginning of the middle class is going to have access to these decorations and things. I always love, and again, these are really dark pictures right here, not the best on the screen, but the Gilded Age, the TV show that's on HBO, and the movie, The Age of Innocence, are my two favorite pieces of pop culture that I always like to recommend to people for the Victorian era that are just so nauseatingly accurate as far as how patterned and colored and how everything is in there. And especially with the Gilded Age, you really kind of see, because we're, the Victorian era, it's a good distance of time, and the 1840s Victorian is very different than the 1880s Victorian. And with the Gilded Age TV show, you really see that in live time, where you have the old guards houses, which are very much the 1840s aesthetic of dark and patterns. And then you have the new money coming in and kind of showing those 1880s, 1890s neoclassical and how it's kind of shifting. So I cannot talk enough about how amazing it is, an accurate historic lesson that those two pieces of media have. So again, Victorian era, we can make color, we can make it last now. We have all of the poisonous chemicals we need to make our paint colors last forever, okay? And we're gonna use that to the fullest extent possible. So we are gonna have all of the colors, we're gonna have all of the patterns. There is not too much at all that we can do. And again, this mail order, ready-made is absolutely revolutionary. Before, in every other building that we've seen on the screen, all of those paint colors would have needed to be a local dude mixing those colors and making that. Yes, he's using a recipe. Yes, he's going to follow the same recipe every time, but anyone who's a baker knows I can follow that same vanilla cake recipe that my grandmother gave, and every time it's going to taste a little bit different. I don't know why. I'm doing it the same exact way. And the same thing would happen with paint, but now you have every can of paint you open is going to be the same exact color. It's revolutionary. Blows their little Victorian minds. Really. That meme is correct. They would explode. So part of the advancements in technology, we can have color in publishing in a way that we never could have before. We can have vibrant, accurate, honest colorings in these books. So we have books coming out like these two. These are 2 pages from 2 different books. This one on the right side is from Michel Eugenie Chavel, I think is his name, 1838. A whole treatise on colors combination and understanding what the colors are, how the color harmony works, color theory, the whole 9 yards. All of these things, there's a whole bunch of pictures. It was so hard to cut down on what I was going to show you guys. They're all available for free. They're all public domain. There's a couple different spots that I'll share with you guys where I've gotten them. But again, talking about color harmony, here on the right side is another book from a couple of years later from an English dude or Scottish dude, David Ramsay Hay. And so this one is a page from his book, The Laws of Harmonious Coloring. He decorated palaces for Victoria, so he was like, he knew what he was talking about apparently. And so in his books, and he had several of them, he was arguing the idea of harmony by analogy, and harmony by contrast. So harmony by analogy, you're going to have harmony by picking colors that are close to each other on the color wheel, and then harmony by contrast, choosing ones that are contrasting, opposite, and separating each other on the color wheel. And so this is kind of, again, the coloring is kind of faded in the book itself, and right now it's not the best view. But here he has, in color form and in written form, these two examples of blue in harmony, of the different ways that you can create a color scheme with using blue. Is it in harmony? Is it in contrast? All of those types of things. The pictures on those ones are super great. I mean, this one, these color wheel ones that he has one that doesn't have the lines, that's just like all smooth. And it, like, your eyeballs hurt when you look at it and you're just like thinking it's a computer-made thing. No, he hand-colored that, and then it was lit. Like, I just don't understand how that happened. And it's mesmerizing, so definitely go look at them. All free, high scans available on the internet. Then things change slightly when these two hunky dudes get on the scene. So this is our dudes AJD squared is what I like to refer to them. Our top AJD is, sorry, Alexander Jackson Davis, and then on the bottom our AJD is Andrew Jackson Downing. So we've got Davis and Downing AJD squared.
Okay.
Davis is an practicing architect, incredibly popular with that first generation of Victorian rich people, 1830s, 1840s. He's designing absolutely breathtaking buildings like this. This is Lyndhurst in Tarrytown, New York. Probably more than half of the TV show The Gilded Age is filmed in this estate. All of the interior site scenes for all of the one cousin that's married to the guy who gets in the fight with the train guy, whatever. All of their houses, all of it's in there. So absolutely beautiful. He's super popular. He has a couple of books that he's written, pattern books and things like that. They get a little bit of traction, but not a lot of traction. And then this Heathcliff-looking dude right here, with those eyeballs just staring into your soul. He is much more on the landscape architecture side, color theory. He just wants to like sit in his ivory tower and write about things. He's not really designing houses. He makes designs, but he's like doesn't want you to pay him to build it. Davis will do that for you. He just wants to draw things. So him sitting sullenly thinking about color and how we should be evolving, comes up and is on the same wavelength of Davis on this idea of, yes, we want colorful patterns, but we personally think it should be a little bit more subdued and natural. We want to be one with nature. We want our cottages, as rich as we are and as beautiful as these buildings are, we want to fade into the beautifulness of the nature. Davis has his first book, doesn't really get a lot of traction. Downing has a couple books, gets traction, but not much, and then the two of them get together. In 1842, they published their first book, Cottage Residences. This is from the one? Yes. This is one of the color swatches that is included in that shows the good colors for exterior buildings. It's a little faded, obviously, because it's watercolor, so they're not totally accurate, but we can see we got those big bright blues, we have, bold color choices in there. This book goes gangbusters, everybody's buying it. Rich people are building the buildings and following this ideal, but not the normals, really. It's just the super duper rich people. And then sadly, Sullen Eyes tragically dies in the 1850s, early 1850s, is not very old. in a steamer boat accident on the Hudson River. 80 people die because a boiler explodes and they can't get off in time. So like, there needs to be a movie. There needs to be a movie about this man. That's all I gotta say about that. When in actuality, what real normal people are building is more in line with this pattern book. This was Architectural Designs for Model Country Residences by, I'm forgetting his name, let me turn the page. John Riddell. So this is what we're seeing more often. And honestly, if you look at these pictures, there are houses that I know I've passed in Maryland that look and resemble this, have the same coloring in this. So this is the normals are following. And his book, again, this is free on the internet, public domain, you can go and access it. And this particular scan is like real good. Like I think that you could actually print them and get them like big posters and it wouldn't be pixelated. Like it's a really good scan. So, you know, in the pattern book, it has not only these beautiful color plates showing you the color arrangement and what they can look like, but it gives you the full floor plan. So this is the first floor of this building right here. It has a full two-width, two-room deep parlor, and then other rooms here. You have the main elaborate staircase in the front, and then the back service and staircase. So it has all of the details to get you started with your local architect, your local builder, to try to mimic and copy that. During this Victorian era, again, technology is advancing. We can keep our metal, our paints forever because lead and asbestos is the greatest thing we've ever discovered. And we're going to put it into every single thing that we make. And so here are just a few of the thousands upon thousands of color cards that you could get. You know, if you had a local hardware store or general store, they might have them on set up that you could pick them, like how we have color cards in hardware stores today. Or you might be reading your lovely home ladies magazine and right away to get the color card for the paint company. That's really how a lot of people got it. They got it sent to them in the mail. Where the colorings on drawings and in books, these could have fading issues where maybe the color isn't as authentic to what it was in that time period. There might be some variety. When we look at the color cards, we can kind of trust these a little bit more because again, it's the actual paint material and it's chock full of lead and asbestos. So it's like solid on there. Don't eat any of these or lick any of these. Right. You will get sick. So all of these wonderful images that I've been using, and again, when you get the PDF, I have, I have the source and the links for all of them. Almost all of the ones that you're seeing on the screen right now came from the APT Building Technology Library. APT is the Association of Preservation Technology. It's the Science National Nonprofit for Preservation, where a National Trust for Historic Preservation is the advocacy, Mormon Feely Save Buildings. APT is doing the math and science on saving them. They have it's on Internet Archive, thousands upon thousands of materials like this, different guidebooks from all different ages and time periods. Here is a newspaper article, again, an article, but it might have been an ad paid for by this gentleman, where it's the Cecil Wig 1871 saying how Mr. Ford has newly painted his house with these mineral paints and it's looking fabulous. And here is that paint card for that paint. So one of the paint colors that he used on his house most likely was one of the ones that we see here on this card, which is just kind of crazy cool. All right, that is Victorian. We're just heading right in. I mean, obviously, somebody already asked a question, but if anyone else has a question, please, no worries, shout out. So like I said in the beginning, really generous, broad time periods that we're breaking into just for ease of conversation and getting through in a reasonable amount of time. So here we're going to talk about the early modern. So again, right around the cusp of the 1900s, but we see some examples into the 1880s, 1890s, into the 1940s. We're talking about those craftsman-style homes, prairie-style homes. Arts and crafts, the term is used, in my opinion, incorrectly often. Here in America, it really should be used, or it is intended to be used for like the furniture and interior designing things. But in England, arts and crafts can often be used as an architecture term that's similar to prairie, kind of craftsman kind of mashup. Prairie style is Frank Lloyd Wright, not done by Frank Lloyd Wright. That's what prairie style is. And so we reason that this is kind of early modern. We look at these pictures, and we'll have a bunch of pictures on the next slides. They look like the Victorian examples, but they're stepping away in significant strides in specific design elements and in technology that, while it may resemble colonial, it's much more a modern material. It's been reinvented too much, and it's much more now, when you look in the broad spectrum, getting you right up to those Art Decos and mid-century modern and the complete new kind of idea of what architecture should be. So these are kind of those middle rounds where it's not really totally colonial Victorian, but we're not modern yet. This time period and the role of paint color and designs of architecture, residential architecture specifically, is heavily influenced during this time period by the development of zoning, by the development of public housing subsidies like the FHA loan program and other things that are created to help people through the Depression and the post-war era to get their American dream. Almost all of the images that we'll see in this section aren't just made by these companies that are trying to, spread awareness and create marketing materials for them. Almost all of these are created as part of these federal government programs to get housing developed and put together. So when we think about that, we have to understand the role of white supremacy in the influence of color and design during this time period. Zoning is created, we can argue, and there's lots of other factors that play into this, but primarily zoning rules are to regulate who cannot and what cannot be built in your community. Who you want in your community, who you don't want in your community, what types of buildings and what quality and aesthetic they can have. That's how it begins, so that is a white supremacy idea of it. It's focusing on creating moral ideas on the architecture of the color. Before, we're just talking about fun colors. Here's the things that you can do. Everyone can have their own bright colors. We might think it's disgusting and that weird dude is going to write that in his book, but there's not like someone going around and saying, you can't paint your house this color. We don't do that paint color here. Or that paint color isn't for that type of building, it's only for this type of building. There were no rules or regulation in that way. We reach this time period, there's going to be the beginning of rules and regulation, and we cannot deny the connection of that to white supremacy. Also, the FHA loans, all of these books that are showing all these amazing houses that you can buy and buy the patterns and easily make yours today, none of them are open to people of color by law. So again, you're creating this idea that you can live in this beautiful home and have these color schemes and have this aesthetic, but by law, none of that is open to anyone of color. So this early period, we can love these pictures and these goofy images and all these things that we're going to talk about, but the white supremacy of it is just so ingrained in it. We see, again, kind of the continuation, because there's like a little bit of an overlap between that Victorian and what is becoming this early modern. So we have, these are houses that we now probably would describe as early colonial revivals, maybe late generation Queen Anne, but more like colonial revivals, because and the reason we call them colonial revivals is that they're pulling elements from colonial time periods. We're seeing those colonial and classical elements, but they're pairing them in ways that would never have existed in the original colonial time period. You're seeing paired windows. You'd never see two windows right next to each other in a colonial period because you'd have to have a beam there to support that window and have that. So you can't have two windows right next to each other. You see two windows right next to each other on a colonial building, that is built in this time period. That's a modern, that's a balloon framing thing that's allowing you to do that. So we see again on APT's website, their building technology library, you'll see tons of ads and things like this showing you all the different color schemes that you can do with these beautiful companies. Here's this gorgeous, make yours the home beautiful. This cover is absolutely beautiful. And here are just examples of the different types of homes that you could have during this time period. These are going to be colonial revivals, again, matching elements that never would have existed in original colonial time. This unique colonial is unique because you would never have a dormer like that in a colonial building that would have a roof shape like that. So matching these things. But again, if you read through these descriptions, it's a lot of personal opinion-y, moral justifications and explanations of this is the good and better version, and this is not the good and better version, those types of messages. This is one of my most favorite ads. I think this is from the 30s. And it's modern color stylings for your homes. Again, it's from a company that was part of their FHA loan program. They'd have the plans that were approved by the federal government, and they would come out with these jazzy little guides to show you how to spice up this little drab little salt box that you bought for cheap from the federal government, but now you can make it look how you want it. And the whole thing of it was applying modern color stylings of like clothes to your house. So the first couple of pages are all these little images of these women in their different outfits and how one is styled and one's not styled. And the explanations are wild. So like, I highly recommend going and look at. But this example I love because it shows how they're telling us that this is not styled. This home loses its charm and dignity through the improper use of too many colors and colors which are too dark. Again, it's not celebration. Let's let our colors fly and be fun and make everything how we want, whatever our aesthetic. Too many colors. It is, you've lost your dignity through colors, but look, this completely, totally white painted, no character whatsoever is the one that's styled. So this one is absolutely wild. I love this one. But again, you kind of see what I'm saying. There's this moral aspect that's being introduced into this conversation now that didn't exist before. This is another one I found for the first time putting this together, color harmony in the home. Gorgeous colors. It's more black and white in the rest of the books, but these first two pages, the gorgeous coloring. And here she gives you examples with Alice Lee, thank you so much. Examples for a small house. White body, white sash, green roof and shutters. As boring as possible. We're living in the technology age. Do you think about the beautiful Art Deco and Art Moderne, streamlined, jazzy, cool stuff? White. Please paint your house white because you can't live in our neighborhood if it's not a white house. This is another great one that had really awesome photographs in it. Here for stucco buildings, obviously make it even easier for you on your maintenance and upkeep of your home. You don't got to paint the stucco every year because you're going to dye the stucco permanently forever, and it's going to be that color, so you don't have to worry about it. And this one I love because I think this one was from 55, a little bit earlier, and it had this absolutely gorgeous mid-century building in here. All of the rest of them in the ads were all these kind of Spanish revival kind of inspired ones with the stucco, totally normal. And then you got this literal, actual modern style building in this ad. I just thought that was so interesting and that forward thinking of this company, that they're looking for something to publish for the whole entire United States. Because in this moment in time, in the Northeast or east of the Mississippi, these are the cheap little buildings with stucco that are being built. But out west, California, especially Florida, these are the little cheap buildings that are being built. So they're trying to have it be more usable across the country. This one from Monarch Paint Company, showing you all the different varieties of the same architecture, the same building. Great visual representation to show you all the variety. But again, is it variety? If you compare this to one of those Victorian era paint swatches and color, no, this is the, oh, sorry, my backwards. It's incredibly boring. Again, we've made it so far, but we took 2 steps backwards. And again, all of it is to this idea of creating this ideal neighborhood, this picture perfect, post-war, everything's fine, nothing is bad in America, all of our buildings are perfectly painted well. This one is super interesting, and again, if you take a look at this one, it's super great. The Pittsburgh company, the paint company, every year would come out with their new Color Dynamics catalog with all the new colors for the year, and this one came in with 10 kind of tips on exterior painting that are super fun. If the house appears too tall, the use of a darker color on the roof or upper shutters will also tend to reduce its apparent height. Is that okay? Okay. It was the bell. A door contrasting in color or value to the rest of the house serves to give a welcoming note. So some nice little things to help you, housewife, figure out with your painter how you're going to move forward. All right, so now we're going to be shifting into the actual modern era, where we were being silly and a little bit racist before. We want you to have color, but not too much, let's be quiet. But now it's like, let's be as loud as possible. Like, we gotta live in this, like, let's do this. Also, we can be as loud as possible because we figured out how to put even more lead and asbestos in everything. So it's gonna really, really last now. This lady, I love her with all of my heart. Like, I want the staircase in my life. She doesn't look that happy to be on it. It's kind of upsetting. Sherwin-Williams, also very early paint company, you know, since the beginnings of paints, of ready-made paints, every year pretty much they would have a similar lookbook, how to paint book, that'll have the colors that are hot for that year, and then also a couple pages of just like really basic explanation of how to paint. It would have pictures of like what are good paintbrushes to choose, really basic, clean the walls, scrape the things that like, yeah, some people don't need to be told, but other people, new homeowners, people who don't know those things, can take advantage of that. This one, you know, so we're moving mid-century now. We're, you know, still having some of the house forms from before, but we're not having the big balloon frame Victorian era houses anymore. We're getting contemporaries, we're getting split levels, we're getting ranches. We can afford land now, and we want the land to keep a buffer between us and our neighbors because we don't want to actually talk to anybody in our big, huge suburban house. So I have this huge ranch and split level that's put diagonally on the lot. So again, prevents anyone from getting any closer to my land, and I want it as colorful as possible. This is, like, it should be sold. It should be on a postage stamp. I think that this is absolutely beautiful. Pittsburgh paints. This one was just for schools. Sadly, the rest of the book is just like sad, like color block divider walls and like things like that. But this cover, man, got me so hyped up. But it's absolutely gorgeous. Bright colors. We want color dynamics. And even in the guidebooks that are kind of playing it simple and easy, they're still giving us big, bright colors. I mean, here's this soft pink with white trim. We've got this, you know, bold kind of yellowy what's it called? Springtime yellow. So they're still doing color, and they're having lots of varieties. We have for the loud, proud people that want to be super crazy, colorful, and then we got the people who are still live in like a conservative neighborhood, have their HOA rules, but want to have a little bit of adventure and fun in their colors. And again, like a lot of these ads, they're ads. They're trying to sell you their paint, but they're showing you the variety of all the different colors for your house. But again, almost all of them also include really great educational little vignettes and pages. This one here, we talked about in the 1840s, the color theories that were being pushed around. Here in 1955, I think this was, talking about monochromatic color schemes and showing on a color chart, like, well, those are how you pick those colors, and showing what that means to someone. I'm not an artist. I don't know what that means, monochromatic. I don't understand what these words are. So here, really great, helpful visual representation for someone to help choose those paint colors. Visual representation of that complementary color scheme, of the harmonious color scheme. So again, yes, they want your money, and they're doing everything they can to get the money from you. And this is not doing it justice. It's the most sherbet-looking, beautiful, like you want to jump in it and drink it at the same time. Your house could be this gorgeous neon mid-century dream, right? Fully glossed. You're going to die of cancer in 20 years, but it's going to be absolutely color, you know, distinction created with color. You are a distinct person. Well, just a couple years ago, we were being told that we were disgusting for being distinguished, but here we are, we can have these colors again. And this is one of my favorites. You know, once the Dutch boy starts creating their own annual lookbooks, and just this drawing, just showing all of the houses so closely together, very normal, kind of stereotypical neighborhood for this time period, and again, showing all of the variety of color, that even in this normal suburban-y neighborhood, we can have all this variety. Florentine blue, sandalwood, well, that's not a fun name, bamboo house, white sash trim, Nile green, ooh, that's Nile green. Still don't know what parrot green is. All right, so that is crash course. Very abbreviated, abridged of color theory for houses. Let's talk just a little bit about what we can do now. You can use that to help you color your houses. You don't have to use that. You live in America, and for right now, we have the freedom to choose our own paint colors. If you do live in a historic district that is locally landmarked, there might be some review for colors. There's a lot of arguments and disagreements and conversations about that, so definitely talk to your city representative, talk to nonprofits like us for advice. Usually and technically to the rules, when you have a locally landmarked building and the whatever design guidelines that exist, it's really just focusing on the color for things that are going to be permanent. They're not necessarily going to approve and say you have to use historic colors for painting the clapboard, but if you are putting a dyed stucco or concrete that's going to be permanently a color, they might have some thoughts and opinions in helping you choose that color. But again, that depends on the community. But okay, so you're deciding I got this beautiful historic house, I want to do it right, whatever that means, because there's 5 million answers of what right could be, depending on how old your building is. If you have a colonial era building, that's 7, 8 different color campaigns that could have existed on that building. So you have to pick which one is the one that you want to do, right? So we can do it by the science way, or we can do it by the conjecture way. So science way is science, getting those paint analyses done. It is expensive. So honestly, do not recommend it unless you have some sort of crazy important National Historic Landmark type house where you are doing a capital R restoration project. If it's just your normal house, it's a lot of money. You can do a lot of investigating on your own. There's a lot that can be visible by the naked eye. You don't necessarily need to have the super duper fancy stuff. But you can pay someone to come and analyze the paint chips in your house and produce funky images like this one. This is from the F.W. Fraley storehouse. They did paint analysis. This was from a door that was dated to, I think it was 1906. And so you can see all the different layers of the finishes that have existed on that door. I was participating at a project back in New York State when we did a wallpaper analysis. And we just literally cut a 6 by 6 inch of the plaster out of the wall, sent it away, and they delicately peeled every single layer out. And we were able to then Google image that wallpaper and find the original manufacturer of it. It was super bananas, crazy. And so you can do the same with the paint colors. Then you can take those samples and figure out, well, what made up that? What is the scientific recipe that created this middle layer of yellow right here? You can do that math and the science and analysis to figure that out. Or, if we don't want to do the science, which is perfectly fine, I don't have money for that, we're going to go the conjecture route. So that's going to be using documented evidence. All the things that we just talked about, knowing when your building was built, seeing if there are any other historic images or information about the building that might give you info about what was painted originally or whatever time period you're trying to bring the building back to. You can use all of the materials that we just looked at, all these crazy publications and things. You know your house was built in 1845 and was meant to be in this type of style. You can go find a pattern book from 1845 and see what are they telling people to paint their houses. What are the color schemes? And you can use that as your inspiration for creating those. There are no rules, but there are rules. If you want there to be rules, you can follow those rules. But you don't have to follow the rules. You can paint your house whatever color you want. As a preservationist, that is an incredibly important thing to me. You can paint your house whatever color you want. Paint is not that serious. Creating your color schemes, right? I actually Googled this yesterday. And you know, in the world of Etsy and everyone having all of these kinds of easy ability to make and sell things on the internet, you can even go out and buy like little charts that have like generic buildings on them, and then you can like color them and make like your practice house. I saw a TikTok video where a woman took like a picture of her house dead on and then put it into Photoshop and turned it into a line drawing and made her own little chart to create her paint scheme. So using technology to help that. But again, you can do whatever your heart's desire. But to make it easy for you, and that you're not standing up there on the ladder and realizing, oh, I'm painting the same 2 colors next to each other. Do I want to be doing that? Take the time to make that plan and figure out what you want to be painting in there. What are the color combinations that you want to do? It does not, actually, what else? I have a chart, I think it's in a couple of slides, but I have from this book right here. This absolutely amazing, incredibly detailed, every single part of the building that you could ever think of labeled. I have it scanned. You guys are all going to get a copy of it in the follow-up email. So again, to help you figure out all the different doodads, depending on your building. If you have a building that is this highly decorative, Victorian, you need to figure out what are all the different parts of the dormer or the cornice line so you can figure out what color you're going to paint it. Because no one wants to be standing on the ladder in real time making that decision. And again, you can rely on advice, tried and true advice. This is from the 50s, but it's built on that color theory that we talked about from the 1830s and 40s and 50s. Do you want it to be complementary? Do you want it to be analogous? Do you want it to be, similar? And using these things to help shape that. This is another great resources from the 1880s or 90s. I put myself as credit because I've had these pictures for so long, I have no recollection at all of where I got them anymore, and Google reverse image did not help. So again, using these kinds of guides of how to help pick colors together. You can follow those rules, you don't have to follow those rules. You can pick whatever colors you want, but the resources exist if you want to use those and rely on them. Here's another example, again, of even just the basic tech side of it. Once you actually pick the colors, doing the painting job, if you're not going to pay someone else to do it. And here from the 1956, I think this is Sherwin-Williams. Yeah, Sherwin-Williams. This was in their lookbook for that year, and it's just the most basic, straightforward explanation of how to paint a house. Not everyone is taught that as a child. No one, it's not one of those things they tell you in school. So again, nice basic information is out there, resources for you to use. The most important one is this last one about playing it safe and disposing of your rags appropriately. I never lit a pile of rags on fire at a preservation project site and almost burned a building down. I never did that. So I don't want anyone else to never do that as well. Thank you. All right, so this is that image. It's all, it's huge scan, so it came all pixelated on the screen, but I'm going to put that in the email for you guys. Just all of the different elements that could possibly exist on your building and what they're all called. The one thing I will say, as you now go forth in your life to plan the great big paint job of your future, the one thing, if you have a house for the love of sweet Jesus that has this level of decorative carpentry and multiple campaigns and serious, design scheme, please do not paint it all white. For the love of Jesus. Please don't paint it all white. Beautiful houses. They look great. They look great all white. This one, on the right hand, I'm not going to say where it is because I don't want to blow them up like that. I just took the picture on Friday. I had to go on a site visit, and I was like, this is a gorgeous little house. And then I'm standing there, and I'm like, why is it all white? But again, that floats their boat. That's awesome. It's their choice what color. But these types of buildings are literally screaming for 5,000 different colors in a very complicated pattern. You don't want to come up with that pattern? That's fine. I'll come up with that pattern for you. But please don't paint it all white. Well, we'll talk about it. Historic tax credits cover paint.
I'm probably a painter.
Oh, well.
Need you on a ladder?
I don't think I should be on any more ladders. I'm actually terribly afraid of heights, and every single time I get on a ladder, I'm like walking, I'm going half up, and I'm like, you are afraid of heights. Why did you agree to get on this ladder? I had climbed a steeple, like a bell tower one time. I was halfway up, and I looked, and there was like a dead bird, and I was just like, I gotta go. Like, I don't know why I did this. This is a horrible decision. Anyway, I digress. Let's take a couple looks at a couple different buildings, and then we'll be good for the day. This one is the David Davidson house. I think it's Pennsylvania, not Maryland. But here, just literally using, like, I think I used paint, and I did like the paint dropper thing to just get what each of these colors were, and just come up with this very basic color palette that they're using. And it's like almost identical to the pattern book that we saw that was emblematic of the most traditional houses. This one has obviously been updated. Either it was originally built this way or it looked like this and they added a more later Second Empire roof on it. That's totally common to do. But just the similarity in the color scheme and the architecture, these buildings are still around. So they're not just relics from these publishing history past. This house right here it's from Niagara Falls. It's on Christiana Street. That is why I took this picture. Bright green. It's so vibrant in person. It's like Kermit green. It's really green. And we would think, some people might think, oh, that's garish, that's disgusting. It's lost its dignity with that color scheme. But then we pull up this one from one of the historic examples, and the drawing is a little muted, but when we look at the actual color samples, they're very much in line with the brightness and saturation of this crazy, disgusting building, right? This is one of my most favorite craftsman houses I've ever found. These elephantine pillars are just like swoon-worthy. And here we go, this Better Built Homes. I think it was from 35 or in the 30s. Not the same color scheme, certainly, it's very different, but you can see that even with the different color schemes, so it's a lighter palette on this side, a darker palette on this side, but they're still using the same kind of color pattern creation and highlighting system. They're just using a different color scheme for it, right? And then this one is the Barnaby House. Thank you, it says it right there. 1770, this is in, what is that, Oxford, Maryland. And again, the coloring on the screen is not that great, but this bright yellow, it is a bright yellow, it is a gorgeous yellow, font. I don't even know what yellow colors to say right now, but it's gorgeous in person. And it is very similar to what I would think that these two colors that were examples that we found in Maryland would be similar to. Who knows if that's original? Who knows if they did paint analysis? I don't know. But right now, just looking at it on face value, that is definitely a color that would not be unheard of in the colonial era. It would not be an unheard of color for them to have. And I think that is the end of this amazing color journey that we just went on. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, so I did have a quick question, especially once you started talking about how technology has kind of influenced the spread of aesthetics. How would you say, like, some contemporary examples? Like, I feel like on social media a lot, I see this, like, beige mom, beige house kind of trend that's ongoing. Like, do you see technology contributing to that kind of spread?
And honestly, I think it makes me laugh because I think of my professors back in college talking to us about how everything is cyclical and you're young and you think like this man's crazy. That's not true. This is one-time thing. No, it's so cyclical. So I see a lot of similarities between this current trend and what we saw in those 20s and 30s in the beginning of zoning and the FHA rules, where we were trying to create a particular aesthetic and secret message with this architecture. I think that we can see that same thing happening in public housing. Public housing only looks one particular way. Why? It doesn't have to look that way. It can look however it wants. And so the same with this kind of fast, casual architecture. There's an architect critic out of Pennsylvania, out of Philadelphia. Inga is her first name. Something with an S. I follow her on Instagram. I can't remember her name. I'm so sorry. But she, I think, was the one that coined that phrase, fast, casual architecture. So yeah, I mean, I think the technology part of it is that because design things, computer systems are so accessible now, people can just design their own buildings. You have a lot of these like little developments that get pot up. It's a contractor. It's not an architect or a designer that's making it, which is great. Makes it much more accessible to be able to build affordable housing in a time, a certain time constraint. But that means that those professionals are going to like some sort of SketchUp program and saying, build me a one-story house with this square footage and these zoning laws, and then we get these cookie-cutter houses that are there. So it's great that the technology is allowing us to build these in a little bit faster and tackle our housing crisis, but it's cutting down on the imagination and the fun that we could be having with these buildings, certainly. But yeah, the gray's got to calm down a little bit. The gray's got to calm down. Other questions?
I think people having sold kitchens for a very long time, and I think people are afraid to step out of any box because they have to worry about resale. And when they come in and tell you they want a white kitchen and they think they're the first person to have told you.
Yeah.
And you just had 10 people come through that said the same. it's a very, I think people are even more confined and have a more prescribed thought process today than they did at other time periods. I'm not sure if it's technology, if it's everybody, they're afraid to step out of the box, really.
Well, I mean,
So,
obviously.
but I don't know what,
Yeah,
exactly
and I
what.
mean, industry helps that. I mean, yeah, there's still lots of places with mom and pop stores and smaller scale, production. There's, DIY is still a huge thing. People love making things their own. But for the vast majority of things that are being bought and made, it's the same 5 companies, and they're all buying it from the same 5 distributors.
Yes, right.
So no matter how much you are trying to be individual, if everyone's going to Home Goods and buying the same lamp, we're all going to have the same lamp. So that's all we have. But there's so many reasons now. I think it's a much more complicated thing now, with just so many different forces than maybe perhaps before, just because of where capitalism is
And
going.
maybe what you said from the beginning, that it's only the very rich that would be spending on color, and if they're going to pay for color, they want to show it off. So
Yeah.
in the colonial times, if you're going to have paint done, which was so expensive, you wanted to show it off.
No.
And then the same as today, if you're in a moderate income level, you have to feel you have to play it safe.
100% sure. I mean, you have a kid that grew up in a colonial era house in the 1780s, 90s, whatever. When they get older and marry and have their own house in the early 1800s, if they were, not the 1%, they most likely lived in a very vernacular wood frame building that was not painted. Then by the time that turn of the century happened, they're an adult getting married and having their family and living somewhere in the early 1800s. They're going to be living in a completely painted house. So like that next step up, that's definitely happening in design, not just in social rules too. You know what I mean? Like the idea that you start with that immigrant relative, that ancestor that came here, and then each generation gets the next bigger thing. The same thing with design. You have this unpainted log cabin in the middle of the woods. The sun moves to the big city, then it moves on that way too. So yeah, definitely all of that's connected.
The sheens of colonial paints, I'm assuming with oil, that you have more of sheen to it.
Yeah.
So when does it come about that you start seeing these, you can have flat, you can have pearl, you can have...
So that's going to be in that Victorian, that 1880s, 1890s, when those materials, like the lead and the asbestos and all those concoctions are letting that go forward. I mean, you're still going to have a lot of variety in sheens before that. It'll just be more labor intensive to make that and more individual based on it. But yeah, the oil paints are definitely going to have a high sheen to them in the colonial time periods. And then all of the non-oil is going to be all varying shades of matte. There might be a satin to it or something like that. So there are already lots of varieties in those. But yeah, some of them, if you look at the scans, you'll see that they're pearlized, that they have it's not glitter, but they're whatever chemical they put in there, 1890, it gave it like almost like a car enamel kind of sheen to it. That Avril paints, all of their paint chips, they almost had a finish that resembled leather, like a matte leather thickness to them. So yeah, once all of those chemicals got introduced, like there was all sorts of variety and shenanigans happening for sure. Yeah.
This is a little bit about like who was doing the painting. Was there a variation in like, I guess the professional status of who was painting or versus DIY?
Yeah.
Of painting of interior and exterior houses?
Yeah. So I mean, DIY is going to happen the whole entire life, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to have a homemaker, a woman, servants, enslaved people from beginning through the versions of those things today that are going to be painting and doing that themselves. Here in Maryland, we are a slave state, so when we talk about the early colonial construction, yes, we're going to definitely see enslaved labor, African-American labor involved in there. We have a lot, that's something that we're actually starting to get better on in this time period, and again, because there's not really that much documentation, but knowing that every bit of new piece of documentation we get just further confirms how the role that African-Americans played in beginning trades. that they would either have been taught that trade by another enslaved person, and it gets passed down to them, or their white overseer would teach them that trade, and then they would rent them out for that trade. That is going to be so much more prevalent here in Maryland compared to other parts of the South. So we have so much more of the professional trades class being enslaved and free African Americans, because Maryland had both, compared to other places in the South. So that's definitely there. There's a couple of books that I recently found that were like these textbooks that were written in the 70s at the beginning of the Black History movement and getting that into higher ed. And there's a couple of textbooks I found that had so much information about different Black tradespeople from this time period. I think a lot of that has gotten lost now. So there's a lot of institutions, we're one of them, a couple of other groups that are starting to try to get that back together. But you know, whether it's African Americans enslaved free or white tradespeople, it's going to be much more, you know, self-taught through the colonial period up until the Victorian era. It's not until after the Industrial Revolution and all of these fancy technology things that now we have these manufacturing production lines that we have the professionalization, and we have the big painting companies and the trades teams and things like that. So it's going to be super small scale, making it yourself or hiring the one dude. Something also to keep in mind that I learned as it relates to brick paints and washes, here we would have more colonial brick buildings. It's not going to be a painter or glazer that would paint a brick building, because they would be for carpentry and wood paintings type stuff. It's the mason that is going to be painting and putting on the brick washes, because all of those washes use lime, and only masons, because we inherited in the early years of our country the medieval trade organization and how that was all structured, only masons were given permits to buy lime. So all the white washes were done by masons, because they were the only ones that would have access to that, whereas a carpenter wouldn't have a reason to buy that lime. They'll have oil paints, they'll have the other types of distemper paints and other mixes, milk-based paints. But the lime washes, only a mason would be the one that could do that. I just learned that. Fun facts for everybody. Any other questions? This was super fun. This is the first time I've done this lecture in this setting, so any feedback, please. I cannot tell you how many things I had to cut out, and I can't believe we even went this. I had no idea how long it was going to take me. So there's tons of pictures. It's going to take me a minute to get that follow-up email, because I want to give you all the cool things, so you'll get those links. But thanks, everybody, in our beautiful setting.